Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this virtual church service for Sunday, May 3rd, 2020 at Cedars Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Reverend Zachary Vinson, and I want to thank you for taking the time to join us in this virtual space. Whether you're watching this service live as we're broadcasting it or the recording at a later date and time, I hope this service provides you an opportunity to reconnect to your own deeply held beliefs and guiding principles, and be reminded of those things in life that are worth striving for. At Cedars, we are a welcoming congregation. That means that we seek to affirm the worth and dignity of every person. And so my hope is that no matter where you're from, who you love, what you believe, or any number of those characteristics that make you uniquely you, I hope that you will still find a place and feel at home in this community. May this be a time where we are connected no matter where we are on life's journey, and be reminded of the fact that life is sacred in all of its many forms. And so with that said, I want to welcome you again to this church service this morning and invite us to continue to arrive into this space as we listen to today's prelude, Nocturne in E minor by Frédéric Chopin, performed by our own music director, Chris Smella. So if you were paying close attention, you may have noticed that there is something different about the room that I'm in right now compared to the room that I was in the welcome segment of our worship service this morning. So technically, it's the same room. I still have my plants all set up behind me, the lovely flowers that our music director, Chris Smello, brought to put up in the background here. So it's still the same room. I'm still the same, wearing the same clothes. I have my same stole on. But the thing that has changed is that in the welcome segment of our service, it was daylight. And now here we are after the prelude in our call to worship, and it's nighttime. In fact, if you look out the window there, you'll see that it's pretty dark. Other than my neighbor's porch light across the street, there's not a whole lot out there that you can see. Earlier, I had the curtains closed, and there was so much light streaming through that had they been open, I would have been so backlit that my face would have just been in shadow. So it's kind of, here we are. We have morning and night in the same worship service, this strange time travel. And for many of you, you're watching this and participating in this service at a completely different time altogether. For most of you, it's probably a little after 11 a.m. on Sunday, May 3rd, 2020. And still for more of you, you're watching this at another time and possibly a completely another date altogether because you're watching the recording after the live stream. As I mentioned last week, time is weird. It's weird. It moves in weird ways. It connects us in weird ways. And here we are this week, connecting with this weird sense of time, participating in our own strange time travel adventure. It's kind of cool, actually. So I will let you in on a little secret. I've actually recorded both of the parts of the service that you've seen so far. Yesterday, or perhaps even more days in the past than yesterday, depending on when you're viewing this. But I recorded most of this on Saturday, May 2nd. Up until this point, I've been really careful recording a lot of these live services to try to do it at a similar time of day. I've done this to work to make sure the lighting is consistent throughout the service, that it's a consistent time of day when the service will actually be taking place. So anything that's live streamed with me, the lighting is similar. Also, so it feels similar since most of us are in the North Kitsap geographic area. It would feel similar for you watching if you were watching the live stream to see that I am at a similar point in the day, around 11-ish on Sunday morning. Not right now. But I've tried to sort of to work to do this. And I know that the lighting still, despite all of this, isn't the best. And that's because I'm not a lighting technician, though I have started to get a little bit better about placing lamps places so that way you can see my face better and adjusting some things. But I'm not a lighting person. But I work to try to build this continuity so that way we could feel connected as if we were in the same moment. But since I was running out of time this week, I made the decision to forego this practice and am recording some things after dark. kind of scary, actually. And I guess I could have just let this element of the service go completely unmentioned. In fact, I think unless I called this much attention to it, a lot of people might not even notice. But I decided that it was worth pointing out because I think that this feature of how we are gathering, this strange time travel, actually helps to make a point that is relevant to what I'll be discussing in my reflection later. The way that I was doing services leading up to this week allowed for a sense of continuity that added to the illusion that we are all participating in the same experience at the same time. But that's all it was, is an illusion. In reality, much of the material was recorded in the late mornings of the days leading up to Sunday. I might start on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, all in the same time period of day, recording these things to help foster this illusion that we're participating in the same time. So most of what you have been experiencing, though, in these services, from my point of view at least, has already taken place days before. And yet, for all of you participating in this service now, whenever now happens to be for you, whether it's Sunday, May 3rd, 2020, or another day altogether, the experience that you are experiencing as you participate in this service still feels brand new to you. Despite the fact I have already been through these scenes, you have no knowledge of my experience, and the presentation allows for you to experience things I have already gone through. The way that we use video and pre-recorded things lets you, for the first time, come across things that I have already gone through, but allows you to come across them and experience them on your own time and through your own lens. As I already said, time is weird. It's weird that we can have this experience that connects us and share a moment despite the fact that moment locates us in various places across the temporal timeline. Reflecting on this, I came across an image from a newspaper ad that ran in the paper of Lowell, Massachusetts in 1918. This picture was actually posted in one of my colleague Facebook groups for UU ministers. And it's a small square with a black border and text that reads, "With a desire to do everything possible to eradicate this epidemic from the city, Grace Universalist Church will remain closed for another Sunday." I'll read that again. With the desire to do everything possible to eradicate this epidemic from the city, Grace Universalist Church will remain closed for another Sunday. As I encountered this image, I couldn't help but feel like, despite the time separating us today from Grace Universalist in 1918, we are both communities experiencing the same event, but at different times. Realizing this, I wonder, what can we learn from bringing the past into the present and allowing the future to unfold in a way that is guided by the wisdom gleaned from such time travel? This morning, as we come together, I invite us to ponder this line of logic collectively as we cross time and space to give life its shape and meaning. Come, let us worship together. As we continue into our worship service this morning, I'd like to invite you to join in singing our opening hymn, number 95, There is More Love Somewhere, followed by our Cedars chalice lighting and the singing of our mission song, before a reading from the book of Ecclesiastes. As we come together to worship, we remind ourselves to treat all people kindly, because they are our brothers and sisters, to take good care of the earth, because it is our home, and to live lives full of love and goodness, because that is how we all will become the best that we can be. A reading from the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 1, verses 2 through 11. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What profit has a man from all his labor in which he toils under the sun? One generation passes away, and another generation comes, but the earth abides forever. The sun also rises, and the sun goes down, and hastens to the place where it arose. The wind goes toward the south, and turns around to the north. The wind whirls about continually, and comes again on its circuit. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. To the place from which the rivers come, there they return again. All things are full of labor. Man cannot express it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. That which has been is what will be. That which is done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which it may be said, "See, this is new"? It has already been in ancient times before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of things that are to come by those who will come after. Let us take a deep breath in and out, and still our minds as we listen to the reading one more time through. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanity. All is vanity. What profit has a man from all his labor in which he toils under the sun? One generation passes away and another generation comes, but the earth abides forever. The sun also rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it arose. The wind goes toward the south and turns around to the north. The wind whirls about continually and comes again on its circuit. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. To the place from which the rivers come, there they return again. All things are full of labor. Man cannot express it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. That which has been is what will be. That which is done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which it may be said, "See, this is new"? It has already been in ancient times before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of things that are to come by those who will come after. I'd now like to invite us into a moment of meditation, followed by a song of reflection, time, and soft focus, written and performed by Lois McClellan, with an accompanying video by John Mackenzie. After that, we'll share a moment of communal prayer before continuing through the rest of our service together. Take a deep breath in and hold it for a moment. And when you finally exhale, feel the whole of your being, the whole of your body relax as all of your muscles release and you sink down fully into this moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. And as we continue to breathe, let us join together in meditating on the third chapter of the book of Ecclesiastes. In this chapter, we are told, "To everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to gain and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. May this moment be a time of peace for us, a time to sustain us through the difficulty of the days ahead, as we continue to breathe in and out together. May we remember that though this moment of meditation, this moment of peace will pass, so too will the moments of strife and difficulty that lie ahead of us. Let us now enter into a time of silence so that we can come to a fuller understanding of these truths together. Let us continue our reflection on the transient nature of time as we listen to the song Time and Soft Focus, written and performed by Lois McClellan, with an accompanying video by John Mackenzie.
Time runs like a river through the seasons of my life. Time plays my heart like a bowstring. Time sings my song like water over stone, like water over stone. It shapes my soul. Water over stone, it shapes my soul. Like mist on the mountain at the dawn of day. Like a photograph in soft focus. Time blurs the edges of my memory, softens and sings a hopeful song. Softens and sings a hopeful song. Roll with the river, roll with the sea. Tides and seasons come and go. I can say I love you because that's the way I feel. Can't say I'll never need to let you go. Time turns the pages on the story of my life, offers a variety of endings. Time reaches out from what was to what will be, forms a a circle of eternity. Forms a circle of eternity. Time runs like a river through the seasons of my life.
Let us open our hearts in a spirit of prayer. Spirit of life, Spirit of love, Spirit of laughter, Spirit of oneness and mystery, be here, present with us in this moment today. And in your presence, help remind us of the sanctity and worth of all life. Help remind us this moment of our own worth and sanctity. Remind us that we are a people who are called to approach life with an open heart to each other, and to the fullness of creation that is unfolding in this moment before us. Let us be open. Let us be a people filled to the brim with compassion, compassion that overflows and flows from us out into the world. May we be a people who know that we are called to be the change that we want to see in the world, and be inspired to answer this call. Spirit of life, give us a thirst for justice. Give us a hunger for truth. Give us a longing for equality, and in imbuing us with all of these qualities, help to drive us forward to our goal of beloved community, of a place where all people are welcome. May this be our prayer both this day and in the days to come. May it be so. Amen, and blessed be. Over the last several weeks, you may have heard me say something about generosity being a spiritual practice. And I want to take just a moment and outline two features that make generosity a spiritual practice for me. The first thing that makes generosity spiritual in my book has to do with the way that when we practice generosity, we begin to subvert the narrative that many of us have received from a young age about our worth being directly tied to our ability to earn money. When we practice generosity, we are saying that there are things in the world that we value more than accumulating more money in our own bank account. And that when we give and sort of fund those things or contribute towards those things we value, we begin to subvert that narrative of our worth being tied directly to money. And in subverting that narrative, affirm that new possibilities are available to us and how we move through the world. The second feature of the practice of generosity that makes it a spiritual practice for me is the way that generosity deepens our connection with each other. I think we all know that when we come together and pool our time and financial resources, we're capable of a lot more than we could ever accomplish as individuals. Generosity is a force that allows us to come together and become more powerful than we could ever be as individuals. And so at this time, I would like to invite you to practice the spiritual practice of generosity. This community has been very generous with each other in the past. The fact that we are even here meeting in this space together is a testament to this past generosity. And because I hope we will continue to meet and gather in the weeks and months and years ahead, I'd ask that you continue to be generous. In a moment, our offering will be collected. While this is taking place, our offertory will play. The offertory today is a song titled The Ash Grove, Variations on a Welsh Theme, played by our music director, Chris Mello. As this song is playing, a slide will be displayed on the screen with information to our PayPal account, as well as an address which checks can be sent to if you'd like to make a contribution that way. For members and friends of Cedars, you're also welcome to log into our Breeze church management software and make contributions through that platform. At this time, I thank you for your generosity and ask that the offering now be received. So, hello everyone. This is as close to live as we have been so far this morning, because everything up until this point has been pre-recorded. So, despite the lag that happens between when I'm recording here and when you all are viewing this on your screens, this is as close to in real time as we've been. So welcome, good morning. Thank you for tuning in, whether you are watching this on Sunday morning or at a later time. So I want to give you just a moment to let you know what it looks like when I am doing a service this way. So a few weeks ago, I saw some of you posting in the comments about the various things that you were doing while being in church. And I'll admit, I was a little bit jealous. Even, to be honest, the financial work that Gregory was doing sounded like something that, it's like, why can't I do something else too? So as we've refined this technology a little bit, I have been able to do more things during the service. And so to give you an example, I spent some time playing with my dog Skagit while this was happening. I actually took a moment to participate in the meditation, which was nice to actually get to meditate with all of you and take some time breathing and not have to be the one leading it, despite the fact that I'm leading it. And so those are just some more examples of how time can be weird. And while we're participating in this service, at the same time, there's all sorts of other things that are happening. So again, strange time things happening. So for our reflection today, for the homily, I guess sermon, I don't know what we're calling them anymore. I want to start again with one of the lines from the reading of the book of Ecclesiastes that I shared earlier. It's this. There's no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of things that are to come by those who will come after. There's no remembrance of the things that came before us. And the things that are still in the future, well, when those things happen, according to this, there'll be no remembrance of those things by the people who come even farther in the future. There's this pattern of sort of things happening, us becoming aware of them and then forgetting. And as I think about this pattern, the picture of the newspaper ad from 1819 that I shared during the call to worship came to mind. And as it came to mind, this passage of the book of Ecclesiastes suddenly came into sharp focus for me. It wasn't, as Lois's song suggested, soft focus. This actually brought this past event into a sharp focus. It became clear for me. Here we are, a little over 100 years later in 2020, and we feel like what we are going through today is brand new. That somehow everything that is happening with COVID-19 and this quarantine that we're under is brand new. That we are the first ones to have our lives interrupted by a pandemic. But the truth is, we're really not that special, and there's nothing all that unique really about what we're experiencing today. We simply don't remember the former things. We've forgotten that there's nothing new under the sun, and that thinking there is sheer vanity. For just as the wind whirls about continually, only to come again on its circuit, so too do we keep coming back to the same moments again and again. All the rivers flow into the sea, yet the sea is not full. So if you want perhaps another example of this understanding that comes from deeper in our human past, from farther back than this 1918 news clipping, let's consider the Epic of Gilgamesh. This epic is the oldest work of literature that has survived to get to us today. It's the oldest text that we have that, in modern day we consider. This text was discovered in 1849, and when it was discovered, it was just a collection of fragments of sort of clay tablets that were sort of written in, or they used a stylus that would impress into the clay when it was wet, these little wedge shapes of cuneiform writing. And so when it was discovered, it was just these little fragments of clay. But the fragments that constitute the epic are believed to be inscribed sometime during the Middle Babylonian period, or about 1600 to 1155 BC. So, a while ago. However, despite the date of these particular clay tablets, scholars believe the text actually came from much older source material. Some evidence suggests that this epic draws from source material dating back to 2004 BC. So a long time ago, even longer than that 1600 to 1155 BC. We're talking thousands of years in the past. So that's a pretty long time. The discovery, inscription, and conception of this text took place way before any of us who are alive today, or any of us who will be watching this recording at a later date, were alive. This was way before anyone we know or could have possibly have known was alive. But let's talk a little bit about some of the more recent history of the epic. So the text, these clay fragments, were assembled and translated into English sometime, I believe it's into the 20th century or late 18th or 19th century. I don't have that specific date. But when it was translated, the Epic of Gilgamesh actually was a little bit controversial. And the controversy had to do with the fact that in the Epic of Gilgamesh, there is a narrative that contains many of the same elements of the story of Noah's Ark from Hebrew scriptures. Just as in the story in the book of Genesis, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, a man named Utnapishtim, who, along with his wife, they're warned of this flood that's going to come. One of the goddesses from the divine kingdom comes and warns Utnapishtim and his wife. And it's done in a very clever way that I'm not going to talk about right now, and I'll probably use the Epic of Gilgamesh for a whole nother sermon at another date. But for this case, they're warned of the flood, and Utnapishtim builds a boat. Sounds familiar. And in this boat, they are able to sort of float out this great flood. They don't load it with all of the animals that we get in the Genesis account. But they build a boat, they're warned of this flood, they are able to survive it. What was controversial about this portion of the Epic of Gilgamesh was that for many, having another, much older story that contained so many similar details called into question the authenticity of the text of the book of Genesis. I mean, it is a story that talks about someone building a boat and putting pairs of every animal. I would doubt the literal accuracy of that. However, in getting caught up on the similarity between the two texts, getting caught up on the similarity between these two great flood narratives, many readers miss perhaps what is the more profound similarity that exists between the epic and our own present-day reality. The similarity that was missed has to do with the emotional dimensions that the Epic of Gilgamesh captures. In Stephen Mitchell's translation of this work, the prologue opens by saying, Gilgamesh had seen everything, had experienced all emotions, from exaltation to despair. This opening goes on to outline adventures Gilgamesh will encounter in the body of the text before finally imploring readers to climb the stone staircase, more ancient than the mind can imagine, Approach the temple of Ina, sacred to Ishtar. Inspect its mighty foundation. Examine its brickwork. How masterfully it is built. Find the cornerstone, and under it the copper box. Unlock it. Open the lid. Take up the tablets of lapis lazuli. Read how Gilgamesh suffered all and accomplished all. So I just want to pause for a moment and point out the feature here that we have the speaker who is introducing the text in this prologue in these ancient fragments. But they're speaking to the future and speaking to these future generations about where to go find the text. And it's a little bit ironic because the instructions to find the text under the cornerstone of the temple and the copper box are written on the text itself. And so I'm kind of always curious how we're supposed to find it when the instructions are hidden with the thing we're supposed to find. But it sort of connects the past with the future. And talks about how Gilgamesh suffered all and accomplished all. It's this final line about Gilgamesh suffering all and accomplishing all. This is the key to the point I'm making today. With statements so all-encompassing, there's no room to experience anything new after Gilgamesh. I mean, how can there be anything new when one guy, thousands of years ago, already experienced it all? There's nothing new under the sun after all. And if you read the entirety of the Epic of Gilgamesh, which I would recommend, it's actually a really good read, you will encounter the story of a mighty warrior king, Gilgamesh, who finds himself navigating the fullness of human emotions. By the end of the epic, it's true that Gilgamesh has indeed suffered all and accomplished all. He has known love and jealousy, doubt and fear, longing and loss are not strangers to him. And as I reflect on all of the emotional states experienced by Gilgamesh, I find myself agreeing that he did experience it all. He experienced the fullness of what it means to be human. And again, I am reminded that there's nothing new under the sun. Gilgamesh experienced all those same things that we still experience today. But what value is there in saying there's nothing new and not expounding further? In fact, this realization on its own feels a little bit bleak. There's nothing new under the sun sounds a bit deterministic. What's the point of anything if it's already been? Luckily for us, we don't have to stop there in our exploration, though. And the reason is that in this case, we are new. Gilgamesh was in the past. Even the person writing the text, telling us where we could find it under the cornerstone of the temple, was in the past. But we are new in the present. And so there's at least a few things or individuals that are new, even if the emotions, the circumstances are eternal. And so the fact that we acknowledge that we are new, that the emotional states that we find ourselves in are ancient states, that there is nothing new about the anxiety that many of us are feeling, myself included, in our time of isolation, that there's nothing new about that same sense of hope that many of us are feeling, that when this is over, when we are back to in person, the new things, the new growths that we will carry with us, there's nothing new to either of those. Any number of emotional responses that we feel to any situation we encounter are emotional responses that have already been. And even many of the situational circumstances, beyond just the emotions, these situational circumstances, they come and go too. Sometimes the same story about needing to build a boat to escape a flood disappears only to reappear somewhere else in the timeline. Which brings me back to 1918. During this year, an influenza outbreak began to spread. Over the course of the next year, this virus made its way through the world's population. It's estimated that in 1 year, 500 million people were infected, and that at least 50 million were killed, though it's always hard to really track how many our lives are really impacted by a virus. As this virus was spreading, similar precautions were taken as the ones we are taking today. People were encouraged to practice good hygiene and to sanitize and disinfect things to the best of the knowledge we had of those things at the time. Public gatherings, such as church services at Grace Universalist and many others, were canceled, as well as all sorts of other sporting events, musical gatherings. Quarantine measures were put into place in many communities. And as with today, these measures were not applied as stringently in all communities. In a recent Netflix documentary that actually I think came out just this week, it's titled Coronavirus Explained. And in this documentary, there are 2 cities that are highlighted as examples of how different communities responded to the 1918 virus. The first city was St. Louis, which made the decision to implement quarantine measures extremely fast. City officials made the decision to stop large gatherings, and people were encouraged to stay home. Sounds familiar. In the end, this strategy caused the total time that the virus was present within the city to be extended, but this had an effect of drastically reducing the mortality rate compared to other communities who used different tactics. The second city in the documentary was Philadelphia, which, in the face of the 1918 H1N1 virus, decided to hold a parade. Other large gatherings continued to take place, and many people went about their lives as if nothing was happening, despite the ever-present pall of death that hung over the city. In the end, the virus moved through the population of Philadelphia at a devastating rate, leaving many unnecessarily dead. Today, we can see these same 2 strategies being implemented in communities across the world. Just here in our own country, even in our own state, we can see these patterns by looking at any number of communities. Here at Cedars and in North Kitsap County, many of us have chosen to flatten the curve, like the model St. Louis followed. Other places have made the decision not to enforce stay-at-home orders, and even a few counties here in Washington state where the sheriffs have said that they won't enforce those orders, despite the governor reminding them of the sort of legal implications of that. And so we see both of these models being implemented or attempting to be implemented. And I suppose that there is a bit of merit in both strategies. That there's a reason why both of these strategies are considered and seriously considered and even put into effect in places. But if I'm honest with you, the idea of letting a virus move through our community unhindered doesn't sit well with me. I mean, when I say that striving to affirm the worth and dignity of every person is a spiritual practice of mine, I mean it. It's a practice I often fail at miserably, and yet I still keep trying. It's part of my calling and the path that I'm on as a minister. It's part of the thing that we say we'll do when we become Unitarian Universalists. It's our first guiding principle, that we affirm the worth and dignity of every person. And right now, the one thing that I can do to really live into this practice in the face of COVID-19 is to stay home. Just like the folks at Grace Universalist stayed home in 1918, they stayed home out of a desire to do everything possible to eradicate this epidemic from the city. They stayed home for the same reason that all of us are staying home today. They stayed home to save lives and affirm the worth and dignity of the people who would be impacted if this virus continued to spread. So that is why what we're doing right now, honestly, is perhaps one of our deepest callings to be a Unitarian Universalist. And it's hard. And we feel those feelings of anxiety. We also feel those feelings of hope. And there's nothing new in those feelings other than the fact that we're the ones feeling it now. We're in the same place that Grace Universalist was over a century ago. It's just here we are today as Cedars. And if you are worried about what will happen when this finally does pass, I think that we can continue to learn a little bit from looking at Grace Universalist. Despite the interruption of the 1918 pandemic, Grace Universalist survived as a faith community for years after. It wasn't until the late 70s that this congregation ceased to exist, and the cause of their demise was completely unrelated to the pandemic. Knowing this story, and knowing that there is nothing new in what we are experiencing today gives me hope. It gives me hope that if generations before us can find a way to survive the threat of disaster like a flood, or of disease like a pandemic, so can we. May remembering those things that former generations have faced give us the courage to face the days ahead with hope and courage, to the glory of life. As we continue through the closing of our service together, I am going to invite us to sing our final hymn this week. We're going to sing Spirit of Life again, which is number 123 in our hymnal, followed by our blessing and our chalice extinguishing and our sending music. Also, I want to remind everyone that after the service today, there is a Zoom coffee hour. Details to access that meeting can be found in the latest version of the Cedars newsletter, The Beacon. And one final note before I move us into our final hymn. These ending few slides here, this week the words for the hymn and the chalice extinguishing got omitted. A funny thing with time is sometimes you run out of it. And so I was unable to get those, and so I apologize if you need those to participate in this service. My intention isn't to cut anyone out, and in the weeks ahead, we'll try to get those back up there so you all can participate at home. And so with that said, I invite us to sing our closing hymn, hymn number 123, Spirit of Life. And I'll see you shortly in our Zoom coffee hour. Our service this day has ended, but our service to the world and one another begins anew. Go forth in joy and in the reassurance that you are part of something that allows you to take on so much more than you could ever do alone. Please join me in reciting our chalice extinguishing. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.